I think the West Virginia was one of the finest battleships in the fleet at that time. She was one of the most modern, had the best armament, the largest armament of any of the battle flags in the fleet, which showed up consequently in our gunnery record. We had one of the most excellent gun crews on board ship in all turrets, also on our secondary and anti-aircraft battery. And of the men that I've served with in the Navy, I think the crew on the board of the West Virginia at that time was one of the best and finest I have ever served with. I reported on board the West Virginia on approximately the middle of August 1940. During this time preceding Pearl Harbor attack, we were operating at sea approximately 2 weeks, in port 1 week. This was carried out in order to keep a force operating all the time at sea. We were known as Bat Div 2. We also had Bat Div 1 in the area, which consisted of the Colorado, Oklahoma, and a few of the other battleships. The particular incident of December the 7th was the only time in my prior experience on the West Virginia that we were all in port at the same time.
On the morning of the 7th of December of 1941, I was stationed at the Naval Air Station at Fort Island, which is in Honolulu at Pearl Harbor. I was squadron commander of a VP squadron, which is a patrol squadron, patrol scouting squadron of 12 PBY-5 planes. This was a long-range seaplane that we were used in covering a scouting mission around the Hawaiian Islands. 3 weeks previously to this attack, we had been running on a constant basis 750-mile patrol out of Honolulu with a patrol of 12 to 14 planes on a periphery around the islands from the south to the northwest. Our effort had been tremendous because the patrol entailed a 750-mile flight out to be at the end of your flight at sundown. We would cross over 150 miles of the north of the large piece of the pie, and then we would come back. And of course, this would entail a flight back during nighttime, and at weather conditions that were not the best. This tremendous effort had practically run up all the time on our engines. Consequently, I had gone back to the mainland and had just brought in 2 squadrons, flown them in from San Diego, with all of my pilots. We flew in 24 PBY-5s, brand new airplanes from the consolidated aircraft at San Diego. We landed at Pearl Harbor on December the 2nd. So these planes were the ones that were the victims of the attack on December the 7th. I was living in my quarters P, about 150 yards off of the bow of the Arizona, at the bollards where she was tied up.
Day in 1941 began quietly as seamen on Navy ships at anchor in Pearl Harbor prepared for morning colors or church service ashore. While at that moment, 230 miles away, pilots of another Navy held a service of their own, prayers for the success of the coming Japanese attack. To the Japanese, according to Walter Lord's reconstruction of the events of that day of infamy, currently appearing in Life magazine, it was a dream come true after months of careful preparation. But at Pearl Harbor,
I well remember that morning because at 8:04, when I had just awakened well, and my youngsters were in the room with me. I had just looked at the clock, and I'd set it for a 9:30 get-up. And just as I turned over, I heard this rumble, and I was wondering who was firing on Sunday morning. But finally, this rumble came in a little closer, and then one of my youngsters came running into the bedroom, hollered, "Daddy, quick, somebody is shooting at us."
Surprise, America suffered a staggering blow. In just 2 hours, a sneak enemy attack had virtually destroyed the heart of our fleet.
Our officer of the deck sounded emergency drill procedures as he saw the planes approaching and thought possibly they were ours and were going to crash into the ship. So we were all on our way to assemble emergency drills. Approximately 2 minutes after the emergency drill was sounded, men had not yet arrived at the station. Mostly they changed it. The officer deck saw that what was happening and changed it to general quarters, and all hands to man the battle stations. So immediately upon sounding the general quarters, I started for my battle station, which was down on the third deck in Central Station. As we went down there, of course, I hadn't any more and got to my station till we received our first torpedo hit.
So immediately I jumped up, ran out in the yard, and there I saw the torpedo planes that were launching the attack on the West Virginia. So I remember the Arizona and the Nevada were tied up together right off our house. Then came the Maryland and West Virginia, and then the Tennessee and Oklahoma, and then I think was the California tied up singly over the furthest western bollard down towards the end of the island.
I went up above on the second deck, in which we had a number of injured personnel from the concussion to the hits from the torpedoes. We were immediately, all hands that was able, and started to help evacuate the wounded. We was carrying them out, putting them aboard small boats for transportation to the hospital, and also remove the dead. The ship caught on fire from the after end.
Panic had set up practically throughout the ships that had been struck, particularly after the second attack. Just before it happened, while the Oklahoma turned over topside, she actually went all the way over until a cage bass hit the bottom as she turned from port to starboard. As her topmast hit the bottom of the island, it being of a coral foundation, the whole island shook. No more could I ever imagine a more dismal point in a man's life, to see what he thought was impregnable actually being decimated in front of his eyes. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The Arizona got a bomb down a number 2 turret, and this bomb went off in the handling room, and the whole ship blew right straight up. It seemed so eerie it's hard to describe.
And we had fire in all the area surrounding the ship on the port side. So that only left one alternative for me, was to go off the right-hand side of the ship, or the starboard side, because we was only about 50 yards from the shoreline. And after I swam ashore, I reported over to the Naval Air Station at Fort Isle.
I proceeded just as soon as I got my family, which consisted of 2 children and my wife, over to the dugout under Admiral Bellinger's house. I proceeded by foot, working my way around till I got down to my hangar, and there I saw what had happened. They had strafed all of my planes that were out on the ramp. Fortunately, I had 4 inside undergoing maintenance, that they didn't hit that part of the hangar. They immediately rolled out one plane which was still full of gas. I remember the name very well because it was 23 P4. Everybody was shooting. We rolled our plane into the water and started out, but as we started down to the Pearl City Channel, we found the Utah had been hit several times by bombs that had capsized, and it was a target ship which had a lot of cross ties on the top of it to absorb the shock of the target bombing. She had turned over and these cross ties were all floating out across the Pearl City Channel. So as we were proceeding down the channel in the seaplane parlance to get on the step before takeoff, we saw these logs, and I kicked to the left. As we got there, we just barely did get off. We were just in the air when a couple of depth charges went off that a destroyer found one of the two men submarines that were coming in the harbor, and the seaplane tender Curtis was anchored over, tied up over to the side by the Pan American building. She was shooting at this submarine, and the destroyer was dropping depth charges, and we were trying to get in the air all in the same area. So you can imagine how much pandemonium existed. We finally, by the grace of the Lord, pulled back, and the plane stayed in the air. So we proceeded on our mission. We saw nothing else until we started back in when we got back over Kauai around about 8 o'clock that night.
I think from the experience we had at Pearl Harbor that one of the most important things at any future date will be how effective our early warning system is. In other words, we have to be more vigilant and not to let a thing like this happen again.